Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video league starter for 3.19 Lake of Kalandra. Now, poison minions have seemed to be taken over the whole meta with minion builds in general, and I've been updating all my builds. The one I'll be showing you today is a Soulwrest character that used to be really popular some leagues ago and then just kind of fallen off the face of the earth. This PUB that I'm about to show you does not include the 20% more damage buff they got from the patch notes because that's not in the PUB as of yet. However, with the poison changes, we are able to, with a tabula rasa and just using the the build enabling unique Soulwrest staff in absolute trash gear. Basically, all my gear is only showing life. The jewels have 1 damage modifier, and there is a mana moose gaze in there, and darkness of thrown in a rumi's concoction. This is very, very simple, low budget trash gear, super cheap. You're able to push out 2.7 million Shaper DPS, which is absolutely ridiculous, while still packing 98.6k EHP with a 40k fist max hit. This is the one that's going to be very hard for us to ramp up without a shield with this build, but I'm going to talk about that in a bit. So when it comes to leveling, this PUB is actually covering leveling trees, and they will be in detail in the written guided link to the descriptions below. There's skill sets in the skill sets section here for each act as well to help you navigate through the leveling. There are no medium or high budget in this PUB. That will be in a separate PUB because I need to configure the custom modifiers, which I do want to mention before we talk about this. Obviously, you want to cap your elemental resistances and make sure you have enough attributes to cover your gems and your gear. That is fundamental for any build in the game. Also, build like this would benefit quite a lot from having extra chaos resistance, so that is something I would recommend getting. There is a note here, since we're going for poison without using United in Dream, but we are utilizing chance to hit support. It's crucial that you want to look to get the chance to poison on hit with the ghastly eye jewels. The problem with this is that we don't know the numerical value on these modifiers, or if they're going to be hard to roll or anything. So I added a custom modifier to only give plus 40, but 60 would be optimal if you can reach that high. We don't know, but around 40% is what this PUB is designed for, which is what you want to get from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ghastly eye jewels at the end when this build is finished. Do keep in mind that putting them inside the Darkness and Throne will scale them by 75% increased modifiers. Outside of that, the PUB is not including Animate Guardian, and I've turned off, by adding a hashtag in front of each modifier, the damage gain that you get from the specters used by this build. This build will be using a Pale Seraphim, coming from Scourge / Beyond mechanic, and an Arena Master, and these will provide a ton of damage. Just for the sake of showing you the damage output, if I enable those, it's 3.3 mil, but since these minions are not 100% uptime, I want to turn them off to not inflate my DPS. If you're having trouble finding these specters, the Arena Master is from a Drox Influence monster, and the Scourge one is from Scourge Beyond. You can always come into the global channel I made in-game by typing /global6666. And that kind of covers it, the baseline before we talk about the build, which I'm going to do right now. If you watch the entirety of this video and you find it enjoyable or something that you'll play, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more content. I'd appreciate that very much. So, leveling, you'd probably go in with using some spells, which is why we're taking these spell damage nodes. And obviously, these are more a matter of personal preference, because those nodes will be respec after that when you start using Absolution to level with. And that's the name of the game. We'll be pushing out the Absolution as the leveling route till you're able to afford or get a Soulwrest staff. So that's basically it. We'll be prioritizing minion damage nodes and life nodes as we travel through the leveling route. Ascendancy-wise, we are going to be rushing down to minus aggression and then unnatural strength, because this scales the Absolution as well when we're leveling. And then we'll take Mr. Sacrifice on the Merciless Lab, because that's when the bone offering to give yourselves block will be becoming more and more of a mandatory necessity when it comes to surviving the higher endgame content. And we finish off with Bone Barrier, which will significantly help the fist max hit and our EHP, also helps our minions survive. Outside of that, I do want to mention this little detail here with poison minion builds. It's that we're going to spec Corruption to get the Chaos Mastery. The reason we're doing this is because that scales the efficiency of Wither, which increases the chaos damage taken by enemies by 6% per stack. This stacks to 15 stacks, which is 90% chaos damage taken. However, if you are applying it with these two nodes, that's 55% scaling. Now, 55% on 6 is actually 9.3. 9.3 is then rounded down, so now you have 9 times 15, which is 135 minus 90, which means you have 45% higher efficiency of increased chaos damage taken. And because of this, it's very important that we do not link our minions with Withering Touch. That applies Wither. Because if the minions are applying Wither, they do not benefit from these nodes on the tree, and therefore you will actually end up dealing less damage. This is not calculated by POB, something you have to keep in mind yourself. So do not use Withering Touch. You want to apply them yourself. Outside of that, the build is very straightforward, and it can be played as an occultist to go in for Profane Bloom for faster clearing. You will lose a little bit of defense for doing so, but it could be a much faster map clearing build. I wanted to keep it somewhat balanced so I can do some endgame bosses with this build, which is why I stayed Necromancer. Item-wise, like I mentioned, build enabling unique will be the Soulwrest. There's a tabula, which you can change for a corrupted 6-link or whatever. Just make sure you get the correct colors. It doesn't really matter. You don't even need to have a 6-link because it's a 3-link in the POB. The staff doesn't need to be 6-linked. It just needs to be 6 sockets. The helmet is just a generic bone helmet with some life on it. Gloves with just life, boots with life and movement speed. There's an oil of Grave Pact, which is very cheap to oil, just a dexterity, because we're going to need a lot of that. So the amulet is a great slot to put that in with some HP. And there are resistance rings that you should get resistance and stats, but you can also get the bone rings, which allows you to get some minion related modifier rolled as well. Darkness Enthroned, standard roomies, generic blue flasks, an ominous gaze, and a bunch of jewels. And most importantly, we have a medium cluster jewel. The mandatory mod for this is the Blessed Rebirth. This is to help you make sure that your minions gets damage output versus bosses that might do a lot of AoE damage, so that they won't kill your summoned phantasms, which are summoned by throwing out Desecrate on the ground and then casting your Offering ability, which will then summon your phantasm minions. So over to skills. In the Summon Phantasm set, you want to use Summon Phantasm. Best case scenario, you get 21, because adding Summon Phantasm support in the actual staff makes it so that you have, instead of 10 minions, you get 20 minions. And if you have level 21 support gem, you get 21 minions instead. After this, you want to link minion damage, chance to poison, which gives 40% chance to poison on hit, unbound ailments, predator, and void manipulation. If you want to increase the efficiency of your clearing, you switch the predator and void manipulation for minion speed or feeding frenzy, but minion speed should be more than enough for this, and greater multiple projectiles. The chest piece 3-link setup is basically designed so that you can run your Ray Spectre and Animate Guardian together with minion life, and then have another 3-link with Golem, Zombies, and Feeding Frenzy, so you get the Feeding Frenzy buff. Now, it's okay to have more links than this and just try to split them up. Just make sure the Animate Guardian and the Ray Spectre gets the minion life, and make sure that they do not get the Feeding Frenzy, but either the Golem and or the Zombies gets the Feeding Frenzy at least. That's all you need to worry about. When it comes to the 2-link setup here, the reason it's 2-link 2-socket in this setup and a placeholder is because you do not want to link Generosity with the Defiance Banner and Determination. That's only supposed to be linked with Malevolence, and then you want to run Defiance Banner and Determination. They are in the PvE disabled here, and I've placed them in here to be enabled to make sure that you can get the actual display of the build, but this is how I would link them, and I would probably put them in the helmet, because the helmet is an armor energy shield base, but it doesn't really matter where you put them. Make sure Generosity is only linked to Malevolence. The utility setup is a faster casting to make it smoother to cast the Sniper's Mark, Desecrate, and Bone Offering, which is to increase your damage output and get our minions summoned. Then we have a similar setup to the Auras, which is a 3-link 1-socket with their totems plus Flame Dash. Make sure Flame Dash is not linked with Spell Totem, but do make sure that Wither is linked with Spell Totem and multiple totems. This is to apply the Wither through the corruption nodes out here, and that's basically it. Ascendancy nodes, like I said, will cover with the Bone Offering, which you need to worry about in Merc Lab, so don't stress with that one. And that pretty much sums up the entirety of this character when it comes to the low budget end. Hope you enjoy that. The medium budget version will also be displayed in the build guide as well. In here, you'll see that the build, instead of doing 2 million Shaper DPS, is up on 6.3. Again, you can switch this into an Occultist, because now we're ramping up our defenses a lot more. You can move over to an Occultist for better clearing. I stay Necromancer because I prefer that for single target than the defense. But this build is still packing a hefty amount of EHP. Our PMH is going up a little bit, but again, it's one of the struggles this build will have because of the lack of shield. It makes it harder to achieve high numbers of armor. We are, however, using stuff like Staff Mastery that gives us recovery of energy when you block a spell, or recovery of life when you block an attack, so this helps mitigate a little bit. Outside of this, the biggest differences with the medium budget versus the high budget is a 4-white Triad Grip, which will significantly increase our damage outputs, and also Uprising with Envy that increases our damage significantly. The helmet could actually roll the new modifier, which is increased plus level to all minion skills. I have not added it to this medium budget because I think that some of the other pieces are pretty expensive. I wanted to keep the budget down on the medium budget. However, we do want to grab ourselves a Chaluya, the Breach Chaos damage guy, which drops a Grasping Mail that gives poison to our chance and hit for our minions, which means we no longer need that on our GHAZZY jewels. Instead, we cover that with our chest. Other than that, just generic life and movement speed on the boots, life and resistances and whatnot on the rings. Again, you can roll the minion rings to the bone rings. Darkness of Throne never leaves. Similar jewels as in the low budget. Roomies is still being used, and now we're adding another cluster. This cluster is a triple notable 8 passive cluster, focusing on renewal and call to slaughter. And the reason we're adding Rotten Claws is because Rotten Claws will then end up on the left-hand side, and we only take the first 2. And in here we put a Fortress Covenant, and then we have the same medium cluster, but instead of having something like Feasting Fiends, we can have a Renewal together with a Blessed Rebirth, which will cost more but be more effective, and we finish that up with a Quickening Covenant. The reason we're putting the Covenant jewels inside the cluster is because the negative downside of these jewels is actually completely negated by having them in a cluster. Outside of that, the build is just straightforward. Same thing with the Corruption modifier and the Mastery of Chaos. Just a bunch of HP, ramp up the defenses. Items are already covered. The Ascendancies remains the same. And then we go to skills. The skills are basically running the exact same setup. Utility, the exact same setup. Everything is the same. However, with this type of approach to the build, you can start looking at alt quality gems or even woke gems if they're not too expensive. This PUB, however, also has some configuration. In this configuration, we are being told to cap your elemental rest, cap your chaos rest, and make sure you provide some elemental resistances for your minions, which is about 35%, which you can get from bone rings. The Enemy Guardian is enabled in this PUB, and you can see the Enemy Guardian gear right there, using a Kingmaker, Crown of the Tyrant with a white socket, Doppelganger, Southbound, and Counts Roots. Now, you can do a lot with the Enemy Guardian with different types of gearing, which you can access to the Enemy Guardian guide, which is also linked in the descriptions below. However, this set is used with the gear displayed in the PUB for the medium and high body version, which gives us some defensive layer, but also a lot of offense. But again, the Spectres are disabled in the PUB to not inflate the DPS output. Spectres we're using in both low budget and high budget, Arena Master, Pale Seraphim. The descriptions and details of this is in the build guide as well. And to change to high budget, you go to the bottom left, change the tree to high budget, go to skills, change to high budget, and items, change to high budget. Basically no difference, except we're now using the modifier. We have a Sniper's Mark enchant on the helmets. Not much of a difference on the gear in general. I've been trying to keep it as realistic as possible. So it's mostly like small changes. The biggest one is using a triple jewel. Like this. And showing about 7 million, 7.1 million Shaper DPS. However, we are ramping up our defenses a lot by running a Glorious Vanity of Sibaka to get Divine Flesh, which is why it's important to cap our Chaos Resistance with this specific approach. However, the problem with this node right here is that I would most likely put that in this position over here. And the reason for that is the Glorious Vanity changes the way these modifiers look because of the Glorious Vanity. Not all the time it's used does this. So this jewel will, instead of being in this position like we've done in the past with other jewels, we'll put down here. I'm going to show you how that looks right now. So I'm going to take away the Glorious Vanity, put in the GHAZZY jewel, and then we move the Glorious Vanity into... Can I please find it? There we go. So we put it down here and we smack that node, and whatever these modifiers are doing depends on the numerical value on the Glorious Vanity. And this is basically the approach of how you play the build and how you set it up for the higher budgets. Very straightforward, very simple approach to the game. Hope you guys will enjoy it. The gear, again, it's just straightforward, just higher numerical values, get some better gear across the board. You can even have a hunter influence on this helmet to make enemies nearby have negative chaos resistance, which will further emphasize on the approach of the damage output of this build. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much on the higher budget. The details is linked in the description of the written guide down below. Make sure you check it out. Hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking.